Oh, what did I do?
That network, so.
Yeah, and they made me feel this like by myself,
What's interesting, yeah.
Sue, we need you to turn sharing on. We need you to turn sharing on. He can't share his screen on Zoom. So I'll give you this now.
Hang on, let me come out there. I already had my screen on.
You just shared your screen instead of turning sharing on.
Thought I
for other
turned mine
people.
off.
So stop sharing. One panelist at a time. Who can share host only? So we want that to be host and panelist. That's what we
Did he get the invite that I sent him?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
You're like, I'm gonna look like
Almost.
as our preliminary speaker. Higinio has given few talks, at least, right? Your series. But I invited him to give a talk this year because he was away doing a Fulbright last year in Mexico. And I thought it would be great to hear all about what he had done during that year and what he learned. And so very excited he's able to be here. And thanks to Create for STEM and also to Prime for publicizing this talk and supporting this talk. I have been given instructions to also let you know about the next speaker. Dr. Lei Liu from ETS will be giving a talk on AI for smarter science assessment. That'll be in this space on Wednesday, November 13th from noon to 1:15. So thank you all, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And I almost didn't come back from it, right? There was so much, there's so much happiness.
Right. Yeah. I have been sharing presentation. Former student program in Mexico City. That was it. So I've been trying this presentation before. I also did this at the research at the University of Maryland. It was received, I have formed already groups with graduate students, and we're sharing readings. People are very interested in this kind of work, which is post which is tried. This research approaches are like capacity, their ways of doing research. So yeah. So the other thing, you know how magazines sometimes they have like the whole covers, right? So so this is the title, right? That I send to this presentation, right? But then this is another one. A little cheesy, right? But
Did you set it to auto?
that's where you to my senses. I and I have right from the important task of making sense, mathematics, right? And also using the senses in my so this is my yeah. I'm used to this. Okay. All right. So one of the first points that I would like to make right now is that we arrived in academia with pre-theorized bodies. By that, I mean we have spent a lot of time with our families, with relatives, with friends, and all those people with pets, with plants, the material world, right? And in all those places, there are wisdoms, right, that we've learned. Those may not be wisdoms that have been put in words, right? Actually, the majority of them are not, right, subjected to the logocentric perspectives that we find in academia, right? So for me, right, the indigenous ways of living with nature or ways of knowing it, those have been very, very strong, you know, as a child, right? When I was growing up, sitting around the kitchen table with my mother, my grandmother, right, like having conversations and learning from those wisdoms, right? No, doesn't want to move. Let's see. This one, okay. So I'm going to kind of like give you a little short, a short tour, right? Like of my kind of like trajectory in academia, right? My formal encounter with cognitivism happens in those years when I was a PhD student at UT Austin. Cognitivism, as we know, right, is a hierarchical separation of mind and body. So that raises for me the question of what happens to our senses in this mind-body separation. So another very strong influence, you know, as a PhD student, right, at UT Austin, came from the positivist and post-positivist perspectives, where, you know, objective knowledge is achieved by putting distance between the subject, the knowing subject, and the object to be known, right? And that raises another question, right? So basically, what you want me is to learn mathematics at a distance. I've been, right, like reading different wisdoms from different fields. Lacan, I like to pronounce it Lacan, right? Lacan, from psychoanalysis, questions the objectivity, right? Lacan refuses the possibility of critical distance or of an objective standpoint from which we can view the truth of the world. And for Lacan, the only truth is the truth of desire. By that, he means the emotional flows activated by engagement with symbolic structures and the attempts to close the gaps between those structures and the lives they seek to capture. These are some examples of those symbolic structures. We are flooded by symbolic structures. It could be a math curriculum, it could be a research construct, a teacher learning framework, a curriculum reform, and even the committees at universities, right? And we have all that, all of those symbolic structures because the lives these structures seek to capture and normalize. So this is a series of still pictures from a video of my previous work at UT Austin. And for me, you know, looking back at these pictures, they illustrate the human body being forced to make sense only with the distal senses. So I'll share a few theoretical concepts about the senses, right? But you know, like a quick, easy review, right? So the human senses have been classified into two types. So we have the distal senses, right, which is sight, and here, right? So distance sort of like mediates the operation of those senses versus the proximal senses, which is, and I always miss the other one. Touch, yes, okay. I have been very close to touch. You know, most of my examples are, you know, come from touch. But children have, right, like, how do you engage the sense of taste in mathematics? How do you engage the sense of smell in mathematics? This is from an elementary child, right, who was in the audience in Maryland, a daughter of one of the graduate students, and I was like, right, it's like, and I gave her some examples of those things, right? Versus what I refer to as a more than human body. Extended, a body that is extended, connected, liberated, making sense with all their senses. I'll talk about a little more about what I mean by this kind of body and the ideas, the theoretical ideas that I'm drawing from. But continuing with my tour, right? I begin kind of like breaking up with cognitivism. We never break up totally, right? With in relationships, right? It's still there, right? It's still there. But a really breakup point for me was during my postdoctoral at University of Illinois, Chicago, in this group, a research consortium, CEMELA, the Center for Education of Mathematics, Mathematics Education for Latinos and Latinas. There, I started reading a lot about socio-cultural theories. Activity theory, I remember, was very, very strong in that, in the after-school program that we were running. I also, encountered teaching and learning methodologies more ecological and also more embodied. We owe big to these theories that start reconnecting the body and the mind. Okay, I'm not there, right? I moved past those theories, but I really respect the groundbreaking work that they contributed. For instance, in an after-school activity in Chicago, the sense of taste is proportional reasoning. So we enlarge recipes with Latino, Latinx children, right? Recipes of things that they love, right? Like lemonade, guacamole, right? I'm making something larger for a party, right? And engaging the sense of taste in this case. Mothers, by the way, mothers were really like central, right, in using these senses, right? But like Marie Baptiste, wrote, despite all these like opportunities, right, I felt that I was still being marinated in Eurocentric humanities. So, after my postdoc, I drove back to Texas. I worked for a couple of years at Texas State University. And I was so fortunate to meet two bilingual teachers, Melissa Adams and Megan Coop. I literally followed their praxis. I followed their activism, right, as teachers. They were more than teachers, were activists. And because of that, it was not uncommon to, for me to have to follow them to a new school, right, because of the restrictive environments in those schools in general, but also in mathematics. So they really helped me reclaim my senses in my pre-theorized body. This is a comics that Megan created. Megan was doing comics. So that's when I started really thinking about what mattered for me as a child, right? I used to love, drawing. So I'm kind of like relearning. But I showed you, right? Right there is my reconnection, right? I'm relearning, this beautiful activity of drawing. So I, the final year, I started writing my first NSF research proposal, and that's when I came to MSU. This proposal, I'm thinking back about how the senses were present, right, in my ideas and in my desire to do these kinds of research projects. So even though it's not in the title, the official title of the proposals, the purpose was to expand cognitivist methodologies in teacher noticing by studying the reciprocity we establish with our senses and with other learners. This is an example of that project. So I was one morning in a classroom, and this student calls me, and since he's like, "Mr. Dominguez, come see this. I am multiplying 4 times 3. You don't see my 2 numbers, but I can feel them in my fingers where my fingers touch. I can feel the 4 times the 3. This paper also came from that project in Melissa Adams' classroom, where we were teaching the concept of time. And, all of a sudden I heard the clock, right? Those clocks in classrooms are super noisy and super loud, right? Like, okay, this clock is calling me, right? And so we literally, I got on a table and I brought it down, and that became the primary, right? The primary material to start teaching children. This was probably a 3rd, 4th grade, teaching the concept of time, which is, by the way, extremely difficult for children to understand the multiplicity of units of measurement, the direction of the growing, right, of time, the numerical growing of time, right, is extremely difficult, right? But in the end, they became human clocks, literally human clocks. They were like tapping on their table, following the rhythms of time, reproducing, right, those rhythms with repeating, Mississippi and all those things, right? And they became literally human clocks. Then comes the project that I am, still working on still in 2 more years. So again, there's no census in the title, but the purpose is to develop teacher learning theory focused not on changing the human, not on changing the teacher, right? That doesn't work, right? Who doesn't like being changed, right? Just because somebody else says that they need to change. But on changing the ontologies of mathematical concepts through a love of the possible and a reappropriation of our senses. These are some products, right? So with the graduate student, Sofia Abreu, and I created these comics, and this is a lesson. This is a 60-minute lesson there in Lansing, right? With 6th grade students, 5th grade students, and we're discussing the concept of space. This one, Sophia and I presented it at PMENA in Nashville. And so this is a methodological contribution, and we are highlighting the possible here. So let me just explain a little bit about this. This is the reality of a classroom. This is the activity and all the senses flowing and getting activated, right? Then what research does is it reduces that into a video. Then if we continue traditional qualitative approach of analyzing data, then that video gets reduced into a transcript. That transcript gets reduced into a set of codes. Those codes get reduced into some themes, and then the findings. So we end up here speaking for the other. Yay! So what Sophia and I have been working, since a couple of years, maybe a little more, is, okay, we have this technology. The technology is based on linear models of understanding activity, reality, and everything, right? Everything is linear, right? A movie is linear. It's nothing but a set of moving pictures, right? Language is linear, right? Unlike sign language. Sign language happens in And sign language actually allows their studies in mathematics, right? It allows the expression of mathematical meaning, different mathematical meanings at the same time. Isn't that beautiful? It's like, oh, I get goosebumps, right? So what Sophia and I, that's Sophia and that's me, what we have, sort of like reflected is on what's going on in these spaces, right? Between this and this, this and this, this and this, and so on, right? So we found an opportunity to escape this reductive process, right? So this comes from right? And so he wrote about this concept of, in French, ligne de fuite, right? Which, by the way, was mistranslated, and I'm sure it was on purpose, right? It was mistranslated into English as line of flight. What does flight have to do with escaping this sort of like reductive process, right? So what he really meant is a linea de fuga, a line of escape, right? It's a line of escape. So Sophia and I are escaping this reductive process, and this is the possibility. All this right here and extending over there, that's what we consider as an area of possibility, and that that is one possibility of not reducing everything into language. There are more opportunities for possibility. So this one we found in Detroit. There's this company of, I think it's mainly women, right? Like they are running this company, the Detroit Puppet Company. And so they provide educational services to schools and communities. And so they came to our classroom to teach children, our students, how to use shadow puppetry, right? And to create stories. Here's one. All kinds of stories, right? So this is about a cat that decides to cut all numbers in half. These are two writers and story illustrators, right? And they decide that one writes and the other draws. And the story is the fraction gods. As you can see, they're illustrating those stories. Here we have children kind of like playing with this idea of the apartment building, right? As sort of like materializing fractions, but also the families living in those units materializing fractions. And the most recent one, project, teaching research project is my Fulbright. I just came back from Oaxaca, end of June. So the purpose was to set mathematical concepts into movements so students can catch up with that movement, right? Maxine Sheets Johnston is a philosopher of dance, and she writes, that thinking, the nature of thinking is kinetic. All thinking starts with movement. These are some works that are coming up. The Secret Life of Mathematical Concepts, Bodies in Exile, and Sophia and I are already working on something that is going to be called The Sound of Fractions. So these are the three main wisdoms that have been informing my work: feminist theories, indigenous epistemologies, and post-humanism. And as you can see, there's, it's very, very apparent, the connection, the place, the special place that these theories have for the senses, right? So the senses are not binary, but complementary. They're fluid. They extend our bodies. So that resonates with feminist theories. The senses animate learners and their learning, which is very consistent with indigenous ways of understanding our world. The senses reconnect as with our senses, to reclaim a different humanity, which, you know, it's kind of like a core concept in posthumanism. Posthumanism is about the center in the human who suffers from exceptionalism. Just because we have the ability to think and talk, we think we are exceptional. So I needed to interrogate theories in general, right? All the theories that have influenced my work, and even the current theories, okay? Do not get me wrong. I am not, you know, stuck in these theories. I continue bringing theories into the practices with the purpose of what Maggie McClure, right, wrote in The Offense of Theory. Instead of thinking of theory as something that we can directly apply to a practice, right? She says, why don't we ask ourselves, in what ways is this theory offending this practice, right? And so I think it's something that that needs to be done more consciously, right? It's hard work, right? Especially for graduate students. I think I remember when I was a graduate student, I mean, we tend to fall in love with theories, right? And I remember questioning, interrogating Vygotsky's sociocultural, right? And one of my best friends in one of the projects, Carlos, was like, but how can you question Vygotsky, right? And so the other one that I'm more recently, you know, I encounter, this one was recommended by Sophia, is Anne-Marie Moll, Eating in Theory. Highly recommended her book. She writes, if theory opens and closes ways of thinking, the question arises as to what the theoretical repertoires currently prevalent in academia help to articulate, but also what they silence. So, yes, we do have theories that focus on learning with the senses. We learn not just by looking at a distant object in the world, but the world enters our bodies in sound, touch, smell, taste, allowing us to learn in the world and with the world. Marx also wrote about the senses. Private property has made us so stupid and one-sided that an object is only ours when we have it, when it exists for us as capital, or when it is directly possessed, eaten, drunk, worn, inhabited, etc. In short, when it is used by us. In the place of all physical and mental senses, there has therefore come the sheer estrangement of all the senses into the sense of having. So the question is, why did the senses figure in our theories? Lauren Berland wrote, then again, maybe we didn't really want our senses to be theoreticians, because then we would see ourselves as an effect of an exchange with the world, beholden to it, useful to it, rather than sovereign at the end of the day. So this is sort of like the hierarchies that are imposed on our bodies and imposed on our senses. Moll writes, sometimes the human is split into two substances stacked on top of one another, a lowly mortal body and an elevated thinking mind. Elsewhere, it is not substances, but activities that are differentiated. In this case, metabolic processes such as eating and breathing are deemed basic. Moving is situated somewhat higher. Perception is above that, while thinking stands out as the highest ranked activity. She continues writing, in other scholarly work, the senses are judged comparatively, which leads to a mistrust on smell and taste, touch being doubted, and sight and hearing being praised as providing information about the outside world. Korsmeyer also wrote, even in an earlier times, when philosophy and science were indistinguishable, taste and its cousin smell were given short shrift in comparison with the higher senses, especially vision. So I needed, I needed a different language. I needed a different grammar to make sense of research that is becoming infused with the senses. Some people have written, I think it's McClure, who wrote something, when we change the ontologies of something, right? We have to change everything else around that different nature, right? Including how we analyze and the languages we use in those analyses. And they said sometimes that language may even sound poetic, right? Beautiful book, highly recommended. It's by Robin Wall Kimmerer, a plant biologist, indigenous. And so I have it, by my table, and that I read every night. Okay, so here are some examples from work that I have done in Mexico and the United States and Chile. I call this theoretical. Well, I agree with McClure and Masumi, right? That these are theoretical examples, which are moments that are seemingly simple, but they had made me rethink theory and practice. So first of all, when I arrive in these learning spaces, right, the spaces are kind of like arranged like this. Very German, right? Very orderly, right? So one of the first, things that I ask is to help me move all the furniture to the sides and make this huge space where we all sit in a circle, right? For me, a circle is a way of removing hierarchies. It's a way of allowing learning to circulate and to flow and to not stop and make and create the sense that it belongs to just one individual, right? This is what I mean by the extended body, by the way. This is not a body. This is not a body. I'm not a body. Even my market bag, everything becomes an extended body, okay, from feminist perspectives and others, right? Other theories. So the body emerges as an assemblage with vibrant movement and collective sensing. All right, so the concept of zero. Across these three countries, Chile, Mexico, and the United States, every time that I ask children, and even pre-service teachers here at MSU, what does zero mean? Zero means nothing, right? So there we have, binary thought, right? All or nothing, black, white, good, evil, right? So the way we animated the concept of zero, I think I'm skipping one here. No, it's coming up. So in Michigan, right? So we use, the teacher brought a little toy car and she marked the wheels, in different sections, in 2 sections, in 4, in 10, to arrive at the base 10, right? She also created this gigantic paper wheel, and that she kind of like roll the wheel over the number line, right? And it makes sense. It's Michigan, right? It's cars, right? As opposed to some, okay, here, yes, that's the one I wanted to show you. So in Oaxaca, we use embroidery hoops, textiles, right? This is Oaxaca, isn't that cute? Yes, embroidery hoops, and what we did is we, again, right, like children divided the circles into different sections. We played with, different base systems. But the idea of, using that shape, which is the actual shape of the zero, right, was to roll it so they can follow, right? So they can follow the growth of that number, right? So in this case, they were rolling out or rolling over, right, their ages. How old are you? But just follow a line, right? Show me how old are you on a line on the floor, right? And then we asked them, okay, so you are, I don't know, 11, 12, take us back to a time where you were like super happy, right? So the interesting thing is that people, roll those hoops back, not to an exact point, right? But to somewhere in the middle, right? And so that also promotes the concept of continuity, right? Number continuity. Bill Barton, for instance, wonders what would happen to the concept of the continuum if instead of teaching children to count 1, 2, 3, right? I mean, even the number line, right? Teachers use, or curriculum materials, they use that, right? That little jumping arrow, right? As if nothing happened, right? But Barton asks us, like, what would happen if instead we were teaching becoming 1, becoming 2, and so on, right? In Oaxaca, I got super inspired by printmaking, which is very, very common, like all over the city. There are galleries, with beautiful printmaking work. And also, there's a museum of the postal stamps, right? MUFI, the Museo de la Filatelia. And so we use that, right? Like they enlarge like a little postal stamp into something bigger, right? And then not only that, but they created their own drawings and their own designs. And here they are like doing their own printmaking work. We also constructed kites or papalotes to explore like a lot of mathematical concepts. So here's one thing that I observed that kind of like always happen. When the teachers, when students, when all of us invite the senses to make sense, mathematical sense, right? We are also inviting many, many mathematical concepts. So it's not just one. So we may start with one idea, but the senses sort of like are rhizomatic in a way, right? So it takes us to different and related, right, mathematical concepts. So here, we worked on angles, we worked on measuring, we worked on areas, perimeters, so many things at the same time. So we also explore number growth, right? This is in Chile. We measure the heights, but what I was doing is I was unfolding this paper from the floor, right? I was like literally like an accordion, like so they could see that numbers are not just jumping, from 1 to 2 to 3, but growth is also very connected and continuous. I brought a kitchen scale, right, to also show them, how number growth can be expressed, can have like different directions. Not just, my point was like, how come we, when we write numbers in our base 10 system, how come those numbers grow from right to left, which is kind of like not intuitive when we are sort of like growing up, right? And feeling and sensing our own bodies like going that way, which is the Mesoamerican way of number growth, by the way, right? And so many other things in our living world, right? In Lansing, right? Like this is a challenge for that kind of like symbolic, formal number growth in our number system, right? This is a real challenge. A balloon, which way does it grow, right? So it's all directions, right? We use blindfolds in Oaxaca to engage the sense of touch. So here, children are touching objects that their teachers brought, right? Basically, they are sensing, they're touching the attributes of physical objects, right? And deciding what attributes they can measure or they want to measure or they are worth measuring, right? Language was also very important. You know, talking about the senses invite everything, right, including language. So we were using non-standard units of measurement. So they were using toothpicks to measure lengths and little paper squares to measure areas. We took them outside to measure the school pool, right? And then they created models, scale models of the pool, but related to language, right? So I said, okay, so the length of the pool is like whatever, right? But what is the unit? What are we going to call that unit, right? And because they were using palillos, which is toothpicks, they decided that the unit was called palimetros. Same thing for the little squares, which is cuadros, right? So they became cuadrimetros. This is actually an example of translanguaging. Translanguaging has been theorized, but it has never been called a post-humanist understanding of language, right? And in my view, translanguaging is that existing of something new, right? Is that trans, right? It's not just one word or the other, nothing official, but is that trans state. I use the idea, you know, the sixth grade teacher one day asked me, Higinio, I really think that students need to understand the relationship across formulas for area, right? So basically, she was interested in them deriving the formulas, you know, for area, right? So I use this idea of, you know, those geometric shapes having ghosts, right? The ghosts that are haunting the formulas of area. And so we can see children here buying into that idea. They are extending the shapes of those shapes, right? But also they are working inside, right? So the ghosts are not just outside, but they're also inside those geometric shapes. And so, you know, theoretically speaking, this is related to ontology. Imagine there's an O here, right? Related to ontology, but these ontologies are so narrow, right? That, you know, this concept, you know, it talks about what is lingering around these ways of conceptualizing something. It never leaves. That lingering, that haunting of concept, right? It never leaves. When I teach fractions, which is one of my favorite concepts, I like to start by asking children to think about a words that sound like fractions. This is in Oaxaca, and so fraction, you know, fracture, fraccionamiento, which is an apartment building, right, is the word in Spanish. Acción, I mean, right there, right? Action, right? We tear paper apart, right? And that's how fractions are created, not just by us, but by the wind, right? By the sun melting, a frozen lake, and so on. This one is also super powerful. I mean, here's reaction, fracture, but this one, relación. I was like, yes. Fractions are relations, right? So we were folding paper, which is something that I learned, you know, in UT Austin as an activity. And I posed the question, which way do fractions grow? And this came from, seeing the growth of number, right? So number grows like, in whole, right? When students learn the whole numbers, right? 1, 2, 3. And I call that, like whole numbers are sort of like, what do I call them in Spanish? They kind of like grow outwards, right? Like they are, I call them presumidos, right? They like to flaunt, right? That they are growing and growing and growing outwards, right? And then I posed the question, and so which way do you think fractions grow? And we were folding the paper, this piece of paper, right? And they were seeing that that piece of paper was getting smaller and smaller. But at the same time, the fact that, it's getting smaller and smaller, simultaneously, the fractions were getting more and more numerous, right? And so they grow inwards. That's what they said. And then I asked, and as they grow, they get smaller. And does that grow ever stop? And some female students said, no, it's infinite, right? So here's an example, and there are many in mathematics, of mathematical concepts where these concepts really challenge these binary ways of thinking. Okay, a fraction grows, in order to grow, needs to become smaller and smaller at the same time, right? And I call these moments when cognition and the senses embrace. I mean, we get so excited, right, when we're talking about philosophically, right, with these elementary children that they jump on their seats, and I see them jumping on their seats, and I said, "Come, give me a hug." So I took also the idea of the circle to Chile, as you can see. Here's first grade. The person in the squatting is the classroom teacher. So the activity is, is about place values. So I ask him to form a line in front of me, and pretend that they are squirrels. And then as in a second round, now you are kids, right? And then I place, like a bunch of nuts and then a bunch of candy, right? You're a squirrel, come grab whatever a squirrel would like to get, right? And yeah, they get the nut, and then when they're kids, they get the candy, right? And then I said, okay, go ahead and find a place for this object, right? And of course, they hide, that whatever it is, right, in places that are very, very special, right? And they're very creative. And so this idea, right, is a way of starting to, support their thinking about how place value really connects the idea of space. It's a way of organizing space and also situating the value within a specific space, right? So it's sort of like almost like coordinating or bringing together, space and value. So I share with, outer audiences what's next. I'm not sure if it makes sense to tell you what's next because I'm here. I'm stuck here. No, I really enjoy being here. But really, okay. So this one, I'll just share this one, right? I am very, very passionate. I'm very, very excited and happy about working on this area. I have been talking with, colleagues of mine in mathematics education, and we all recognize that the field of math education is rich in wisdoms and theories. They are out there. By the way, when I have to, find a book that is not in electronic format from the library, I do my search, most of the times those books are available. Okay, I'm talking about indigenous, I'm talking about post-humanism, and I'm talking about feminist theories. Okay, they're not in high demand. Let's just say that, okay? And this is not exclusive of MSU. That has been my experience in Chicago. That has been my experience back in Texas, right? So that's the good news. You can find those books. Nobody checks them out. So yes, we are strong in theories, right? Related to that, you know, and to the senses, right? It's not that we need voices. What we need is ears. But the other thing that we, you know, my colleagues and I agree on is that what we need is methodologies. We need specific ways of doing our research in a different way. I'm very excited about generating new knowledge, to use a quote, generating different knowledge and generating knowledge differently. And for that, we need methodologies, right? So I just share the example, right, of can we stop the reductive process of coding and doing things? Of course we can, right? We're also thinking about shadows, right? The shadow puppetry really reconnected a lot of our senses in our bodies, right? I don't think there are methodologies that explore shadows, right? And shadows are everywhere. You know, my colleague even made this joke. So maybe shadows would facilitate the IRB process, right? Where, you know, we're supposed to hide everyone and everything, right? But yeah, so the other dimension of this work is that I am making sure that these methodologies are filled with love. We also need love in our classrooms, in our practice. More. There's some love. We need more. We also need love in the research of those practices. So I am working on that, and I mean, I just cannot be more excited about that. So yeah, that's about the time. So let's share some. I don't want to say thoughts. Let's share some feelings. Yes.
Parent of children looking about
The parents actually have become advocates. I saw that like face to face in Oaxaca. I didn't have a car. I was always like on the bus, right? And so, you know, I would see them like when I was like going to get my groceries, and you know, they were on their cars, of course, but they were always very, very friendly, right? Like very you know, acknowledging of the work. And of course, children are the first advocates. I mean, they love being reconnected with their senses, right? And so for me, it's like they are the ones who become your allies, and then the parents support that. So from parents, no. And the same thing in Lansing, right? A little bit less of that, but yeah, we have never had pushback from parents.
So I can't escape thinking about, maybe I shouldn't say that, but anyway, the analogy of proportion and pace,
Uh-huh.
right? I keep thinking about, well, if I double or triple something, right, as far as proportionality, does that really, how does that really affect? I actually don't know. That's why I think it's interesting. So
Mhm.
my guess is it might differ from different. Right, so some things you might get more of a linear, might be directly related to each other,
Mhm.
but other things might not be.
Right.
I don't know. So I couldn't, so you should have brought that up early on because I kept thinking about it the whole talk.
Which also, I would argue, right, that that the senses in that case bring a different understanding of proportionality.
Yeah, I really, I don't know if I put 3 times as much sugar in something, if it tastes 3 times as sweet. Or if I would notice it. Or if I put 3 times as much hot pepper in something, does it really taste 3 times hotter? Or I would guess it more of a exponential. But
Mm.
Wondering about the linear system that the students, that students are expected to make their way through.
Mm.
So it was, it's done a lot of work in countries where the powers that be say, oh, we want more students that are learning, but they still have to take this exam in 10th grade. That's the kind of thing. So, and I thought of that also in terms of your maneuvering through the space of getting NSF grants with this grade.
Mhm.
So I guess that's sort of wondering about that. Crossing those boundaries, like how these moments cause us to theorize, but you add up the moments, you're supposed to get to a certain place. And I don't know, like how you and teachers and people that I think
Um,
enough about it.
so this is knowledge that we are growing, in these communities. That is very, it can be, let me just take that back. It can be seen as sort of like coming into tension, right? With linear thought, binary thought, right? So for instance, in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, a professor, someone I know, after I explain what we're doing to avoid the reductive coding, and after showing all these ideas, his question was, Higinio, so how do you, after doing all that, how do you reduce? So reduce what you're doing so other people can understand that. I immediately said, do we have to reduce, right? At the same time that he was asking that question, this elementary age girl raised her hand and asked the first question. How do you use the sense of taste in mathematics, right? And then I said, I'm sorry, but her question is more important than yours. And then she came, this is during the talk, and after the talk, she was not done with me. And she comes to my desk and is like, how do you use this sense of smell, right? And, my explanations were, around this idea that two things can coexist at the same time, right? Like three flowers may have different smells, but they could also have something in common in how they smell, right? And then the mother was like, yeah, like the book you're reading, right? Like same but different or something like that, right? So, these ideas of coexistence, of non-binary, right? These ideas are not in other fields. Reading, right? The book that the mother was talking about, right? So, to me, it's still perplexing, to be honest, right? It perplexes me how people still resist when it comes to mathematics only. When it comes to reading, when it comes to theater, we are the real ones, right? It's only when it comes to mathematics, right? So back to your question, Sam, we are growing this knowledge with communities, right? With classrooms, with teachers, with parents, right? And that's all I care about, to be honest, right? If other people, I am actually exhausted, trying to make connections. People talk about, make the bridges, make all of this. All I can say is I am still not dismissing the cognitive aspect of this, right? I love mathematical concepts, right? But I rethink what zero is. Can we rethink what a fraction is, right? And so, yeah, that's that. This is knowledge that is growing, right? It's growing and growing and growing. And so, part of me kind of like understands that then maybe there are people who will always feel uncomfortable, kind of like adding to what we already know, right? And well, that's it, right? I mean, other people, like I said, right? Like when I return from Oaxaca, it's like, I don't want to. But yeah, so. Mhm.
Ask this question correctly, but, and I don't mean to be the buzzkill, but how do you, I love this, I love this idea of students, using their senses and, to learn these different concepts. But on the other side of that, I find it very rigid, how do you assess that they're learning? The administrators at a school want to know that students are actually learning and enjoying. I think they are, but at the end of the day, there are tests, right? There's national tests in Michigan or in the state.
Mhm.
And so how do you?
Yeah.
How do you know that students are learning, and how do you, and how do you appease the people who want to see like quantitative numbers?
Like I said, I don't care about those people.
No, that's fair.
So that's part of my answer, right? The other part of my answer is in the all my projects are not about assessment, right? All my projects are about generating new knowledge, right? And so back to one of the things that I was showing you, right? Like the extended body. So your question is, how do you know that Sam is learning? How do you know that he is learning? How do you know that he is learning, right? I am working not with one individual. I am working with the extended body, right? And so, and I am working with concepts that all of us are sort of like redefining, learning to see from many different perspectives, right? And so it is our responsibility and it's our collective learning. Just to give you, right, like a sense of, responding to your concern of, are people learning, even if it's a whole body, I mean, an extended body, right? Is the extended body really learning, right? So in when I was doing this project, the first project that I mentioned, NSF, in Austin with Megan and Melissa. And we were doing the concept of measuring time, right? So that was like a 1 week, right, of studying the concept of time. At the end of that week, Melissa said, Higinio, I am going to just create like a little, assessment task and see what she was curious. Not that she cares so much about, right, about that. Because when you work in with these concepts and with this approach, you sense that learning is happening. Learning, look, when we learn how to, do you bake? Do you cook? Do you dance? We smile, right? Learning, that's my way of knowing that when kids are like, it's like, yes, they are learning, right? Learning is moving, right? Like the philosopher said, right? But Melissa was like, okay, let's see, right? So she created this task and she called it Crazy Times. So she asked the students, so it's like, okay, someone said that right now is the hour on the clock is 9:63. And they were like, and the first reaction was like, that doesn't make sense. And they were like, no, it does make sense. That means it's 10:03. Right there. Okay, you want, kind of like the traditional evidence. Evidence comes from seeing, right? And we want to only hear that our learners, students are learning. We only want to see that they are learning. We are not still, right, attuned to assess learning from the perspective of the other senses. Yeah. Mhm.
About how that, I think, I love this work, but as a, not, well, not in the tenure culture, but as a scholar who might want to follow something like this, how do you get funded and continue to fund when they want to see hard numbers and, data? How do you get around that?
Actually, yes, I think what still predominates is those kinds of programs, right? That assume that we know everything, the subject, right? And the object. The subject is all knowing, right? They should know what's going to happen with what frequency and with whom and everything, right? The IRB here in our institution is still asking these kinds of questions, giving hell to the graduates that are advised, right? But actually, like NSF, for instance, which is the big money house, right? There are very interesting programs. The ones that I applied is called the fundamental, I think it's called fundamental knowledge. Is knowledge really focused on theorizing, right? And so when it comes to that, the foundation has to be open to different theories, right? So it's very theory, but related to the practice, right? And so it's almost like bringing these theories into the practice to generate new knowledge. So there are opportunities, right? So my colleague Beth Eisenman, she was at with NSF as a program officer. And so, I through her, but also, as a reviewer, I have been reviewing for NSF. I know that they want different knowledge. They still, are kind of like attached to the other kind of generating knowledge, but there's a lot of growing curiosity about generating new knowledge. Also generating knowledge in a transdisciplinary way. There's a lot of that, right? And so when you say, you have to mean it, right? If you say, we want math in another discipline, math and art, well, you need to really understand the theories, the wisdoms that come from all other fields, right? To benefit and to expand the way a field has been thinking about their stuff, right? So yeah, there's a lot of, I would say, aperture, right, to generating different knowledge. So to me, that's very encouraging. So yeah. Well, yes.
Senses.
Mhm.
Make you jump. Multiple way of using the senses makes you jump to multiple audiences partner. And I was wondering, first of all, how do we need to address overlapping? Something that the student will experience with taste that will cause a derailment of their understanding of that knowledge with another sense that they will experience and understand or intake something through specific sense that will cause some sort of I don't know, I'm trying to verbalize my thought in a way that will actually be detrimental to the way you're trying to teach. Because you have a focus, you have a focal point, want to get the student to experience something with something very non-factual, which is non-physical, which is math. Trying to get to it through physical means.
So right there's I would say, the mathematics that I have learned to embrace and to relearn is everything but abstract. So mathematical concepts are, from feminist, post-humanist, materialist perspectives, mathematical concepts are material, just like language. Language is material. Do you buy into that? Language is material?
Depends on what you're talking
Um, Austin wrote this book, Doing Things with Words. Right there, you have the materiality. It's almost like, I can make bread with flour. I can make things with words. I can make you do things with words and vice versa, right? So there's materiality in things that traditionally we have not considered as material, right? A mathematical concept is also material. The way I understand a mathematical concept is similar to the extended body. Mathematical concept is a confluence of energies, okay? The embroidery hoop, and then the hands, and everything, kind of like comes together. And not just one concept, like I was saying, right? Multiple concepts materialize and rematerialize in these assemblages. That's the vocabulary that is used in this theories. Assemblages that are continuously kind of like renovating themselves, right? And so it is not easy, to bring those concerns and say, what if a sense creates a sense of disequilibrium, right? Or actually, if we think about that, the concept of disequilibrium, that is how new knowledge emerges. So that would be the least thing that I would be worried about. Like, oh, this sense is kind of like highlighting something, but this other sense is highlighting something else. You want that, okay? Actually, that is called, diffraction. Okay, so reflection is very Christian. Reflection, which is in the qualitative, right? That's sort of like the column, right? That sustains, all this traditional qualitative, reflective, Teachers need to be reflective. We need to be reflective, right? Reflection is just a mirror, right? That gives back a more or less distorted image of what we want to see, right? So reflection is like, am I this good, or do I need to change, right? Diffraction is, for me, is more beautiful and more natural. Diffraction, let's think about two senses. From physics, right? The diffraction metaphor is not a metaphor, it's actually a physical phenomenon. You know, we can think about two waves of light coming together. We can think about two waves of sound meeting each other, or two waves of water meeting each other, right? It's right here what matters, right? The previous way of thinking and doing research is following one line. And does it reflect what I want them to do or to learn, right? This is a completely different understanding, right? Let's just see what happens when two senses come together, and let's study this. This is the diffraction. Diffraction is the creation of a different pattern. And we see it, right? When we make waves in water, animals do that. And I can see, like, it's so beautiful, you know, the new thing, the new knowledge that emerges by sound, right? Like I love the analog sound. And so combining different speakers is like heaven, right? So yeah, that's sort of like my answer. All right, well, thank you so much. Thanks for the love.
It used to drive me crazy, even with my limited knowledge of linguistics, how